lot of people are misunderstanding this quote unquote ceasefire that we're in, because the bombing stopped and the missiles flying at Israel stopped, and everyone's talking as though that, we're in a ceasefire. And I think it's a big misunderstanding. And I want to lay it all out, explain it all in this video. We're going to start us off with this. Let's go to General Jack Keane on Fox News. Okay. And then I'll come right back. Here we go. Joining me now, retired four-star General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and Fox News senior strategic analyst. General Keane, always good to have you with us. You hear this discussion and the potential for Iranian fast boats that could attack some of these ships coming through, or that the Houthis might resurge in order to try to close off the other opening that the Saudis use primarily for their oil transit on the Red Sea. Where do you think this is headed today, General?
Well, I think we've turned the momentum clearly around here. That what happened is certainly the Iranians shut down the Straits of Hormuz, and they got a ceasefire out of that. The war was stopped. That's kind of what they wanted. They offered negotiations, but what they really wanted was the war to stop, because we were pounding the daylights out of them. And the president, his national security team, and certainly the CENTCOM commander assessed that situation. This is the strength of the American military. We're very adaptable. We're flexible. We see what the enemy does, and we certainly switch plans and react accordingly. So you're seeing that reaction here. And clearly what we have achieved here is we're shutting down Iran's source of income, period. That is what has taken place before our eyes. That's economic warfare. And what has it given? It's given the administration considerably more leverage going into these negotiations than what they had the first time. That's the reality of what took place. I think the Iranians have made two miscalculations here. Yes, they shut the Straits of Hormuz down, and we began to pay an economic and political price for that inside the United States. And yes, there was certainly pressure on the administration and on President Trump as a result of that. They went into those negotiations thinking this is going to be good for us because the administration is going to make some concessions to us because of that pressure. Wrong. That did not happen. As a matter of fact, we stood our ground. The president is talking to his team. He said, I want everything. And they didn't get everything. And Iran had to go home with their tail between their legs and figure out what's the strategy next here. The other thing is they're threatening, as usual, strong rhetoric, how they're going to interfere with what we're doing here in terms of this blockade, which has taken all of their revenue away. Well, if they're going to do that over the next 8 days, you know what's going to happen. We're back in full combat operations again. They know that. We'll see if they're actually going to take that move. In terms of where we're going here, remember, this is phase one. The blockade, take their revenue away from them and make certain that there is no ships going in, going out, dealing with Iranian oil. But how much of the other ships that are not involved in Iranian oil, all the rest of those countries there that are distributing oil, are they going to flow through the straits? Or are they still going to be, in their minds, are the owners of the ships still feel it's too dangerous to do that because of the Iranian threat that had existed and in their minds does it still exist? The United States military and the president are prepared for that reality. And if that doesn't open up, and certainly we'll see if it does, my judgment is it probably won't. And that brings in then the operation to open up the straits. And what the military mission is, first clear it, get the mines out of there, make it secure, and then prepare to escort ships through it and protect them all through that escort with drones out around them and drones hundreds of miles away, picking up any missiles that are coming. Same thing with aircraft. Protect that entire transit through there. And that's a longer operation. And at some point, if we have to continue that operation, then we would turn it likely over to allies and partners. So there's really two phases to this. The phase one, the blockade phase, and then two, do we need the other phase? And assuming that we may need the other phase, preparations are being made certainly to do that phase and do it earnestly and successfully.
Who would those allies and partners be in that phase two?
Yeah, they would be.
Who
there
are
are
they?
a number of them that have volunteered to do that. There's a number of European countries that are going to participate. Certainly, allied countries, the Arab countries in the region are going to participate in that as well. And I think there may be some Asian countries, but I'm not sure yet. There's been some discussions with them in terms of participation.
Yeah.
So listen, we need help to do that. No doubt about it. And we've said that from the beginning. We can start it and make sure it's secure. And that's one of the things the other countries don't want to be involved in getting that level of security established. But we frankly do need some assistance to carry that on over time. And hopefully that the promise that we're getting, hopefully it's fulfilled.
Yeah, well, as the president says, Asia and Europe have a lot more transit through this area than we do. So hopefully they'll change their minds. Starmer doesn't seem to be on the same page at the moment, but we'll see where this goes. Thank you so much.
All right, so let's talk about this this quote unquote ceasefire. And I want to unpack what General Keane said there, because he wasn't as explicit as he could have been. There is no ceasefire. They wanted a ceasefire. The Iranians were desperate for a ceasefire. Let's pull back the camera and talk about the trajectory of this whole war, and then we'll understand where we actually are and how people are misunderstanding the ceasefire. The United States and Israel are pummeling the Iranians, destroying everything in sight, crushing them, destroying their military. The Iranians closed the Straits of Hormuz, okay, which is illegal. It is it's international waters. It's not owned or controlled by anybody. So they control the Straits of Hormuz to cause all this disruption. And Trump is every day, open up the Straits of Hormuz, open up the Straits of Hormuz, and he's dropping F-bombs and tweets at them, right? And the deal is with the Iranians that they could get a ceasefire if they open up the Straits of Hormuz and come to the negotiating table, right? Now, I'll remind you that a week into the war, we saw this. Trump demands unconditional surrender from Iran, okay? And he put out a tweet where he wrote on a Truth Social post, there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. After that, and the selection of a great and acceptable leader will make a wonderful, brave allies, will make Iran great again. Okay, but he said that there's no acceptable outcome to the war. There's no acceptable end to the war other than unconditional surrender. Okay, the Iranians are getting pummeled. The Iranians are begging for a ceasefire. Trump says, if you open up the straits, we'll have a ceasefire. Now, think about unconditional surrender. What does unconditional surrender look like? It doesn't mean you kill every last member of the IRGC and the besieged and there's no more regime. What is unconditional surrender? What was it in Germany? What was it in Japan? It means that one side says uncle, capitulates, and surrenders to all of the demands of the other side. Obviously, that happens in a negotiating room where they surrender. There's a meeting and they surrender, right? And the guns go silent. And that's what Trump was trying to accomplish. He was saying, okay, we're pummeling you. You've closed the Straits of Hormuz. Open up the straits and come talk to us. And he wanted to get an unconditional surrender. So they all get into the room. And what does Trump say about those negotiations? Just to hammer home this point. What does he say about those negotiations? Here. Well, this is actually right after the negotiations fell apart, because we all know what happened. The Americans laid out their demands. The negotiations fell apart. Everyone went home because the Iranians weren't willing to agree to the American demands. But what did Trump then say? Listen to this.
Think of it. They're allowed to say death to America, death to this, death to... And I make one statement, they say, oh, such a big deal. Let me tell you, that statement got them to the bargaining table, and they haven't left. They haven't left the bargaining table. I predict they come back and they give us everything we want. And I told my people, I want everything. I don't want 90%. I don't want 95%. I told them, I want everything. Think of it.
Okay. Before we go on, please check out Israel 365 news.com. Subscribe to the newsletter for Israel 365 News. Real analysis, no spin. My writings are there as well. You could also find the Israel 365 Action newsletter. This is a link that is in the description of this video. The headlines tell you what happened. We tell you why. This is news and analysis from a biblical perspective. The Israel 365 newsletter is a daily newsletter that will just give you the quick headlines and some good analytical pieces about what's going on with Israel in the Middle East or other issues that relate to those topics. And the Israel 365 Action weekly newsletter. Israel 365 Action, the organization I lead, is an advocacy movement standing unapologetically for Israel's God-given right to every inch of the land of Israel, Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem. We mobilize Jews and Christians to counter the lies, confront Israel's enemies, and defend Judeo-Christian civilization at the highest levels of government, media, and grassroots activism. We host webinars. We have all kinds of events. We put out important information to help you defend Israel. We run campaigns that you can then be a part of in order to move the ball forward in the information warfare space and in terms of advocacy on behalf of Israel. So please go sign up for these two newsletters. Won't cost you a dime. And you could be plugged into everything that we're doing. You could also say, go to the Israel 365 Action go to the Israel 365 Action website, and you can find all of the Israel 365 video content there. You could find all the clips of my media appearances and, again, information about everything that we're up to. Now, so I played you that clip of Trump saying we want everything. And that was after the Iranians walked away from the table. So let's understand what just happened here. Trump saw the ceasefire as an opportunity to put the guns down, bring them to the table, and have them surrender. Unconditional surrender. And that's why he said, I want not 90%, not 95%, but all of my demands, all of them. In other words, unconditional surrender. This isn't really a negotiation. It's for the Iranians to capitulate and to agree to the American demands, period. That's what he wants, unconditional surrender. Of course, surrender happens when you have to stop fighting for the people to surrender. But what happened? The Iranians didn't really close the Straits of Hormuz, which means that they violated the ceasefire. They violated it, and because closing the Straits of Hormuz is a form of warfare, which brings us to what Trump did next. This current blockade that is going on, you notice what General Keane said there. They had wanted a ceasefire, but this blockade is economic warfare, and this is a phase in the war. I'm unpacking what he said there. You see, this isn't really a ceasefire. From time immemorial, going back to biblical times, going back throughout history, a siege, a blockade is a form of warfare. It's a type of warfare. It's not a pause in the war. When the Romans laid siege to Jerusalem for months on end, that wasn't a pause in waging war. That is part of waging war. See, that's what everyone's missing here. This war there's no pause in the war. There's a pause in the kinetic activity of the guns and the airplanes, but that's not a pause in the war at all. It's just shifting to a different type of warfare. So again, here's what happened here. Trump said from the outset he wants unconditional surrender. Pummeling the Iranians, they close the Straits of Hormuz. He wants them open. So he didn't say come and surrender, because then they never would have come to the table and agreed to open the straits. And that's why Trump's not talking in terms of them already having surrendered or saying that he wants them to surrender. He's saying he wants them to come to the table and work out a deal, okay? But what he really wants, as he said to Maria Bartiromo, is 100% of his demands, which means he wants surrender, okay? They don't give in to the demands. He puts a blockade on them, which is just moving to a different type of warfare. It also, having them partially open the straits or pretend to open them and pausing the fighting, gave the Americans the opportunity to consolidate the resources they need to open the straits themselves and to start moving into control the Straits of Hormuz. That doesn't have to be done by bombing and air raids and all that. But what the Americans have now done is they've laid siege to Iran. They've blocked off, they haven't only blocked off the Straits of Hormuz. A lot of people are missing this too. They blocked off all the ports of Iran so that Iran's economy is now choked. That is a form of warfare. The war has not abated at all. There was a pause to see if they would surrender. They didn't, so they moved to siege. So the Americans moved to siege warfare. Okay? That's what's happening. People are misunderstanding this. And there's a lot of people on our side who are all worried, oh, there's going to be a deal. The regime is going to remain intact. No, it's not. The regime is not going to remain intact. Just like, look, Hirohito surrendered to the Americans. Okay, that doesn't mean that they all got killed. There were some people running Japan afterwards under the auspices of the Americans on the terms set by the Americans because it was unconditional surrender. Trump has terms, and the terms he has set are the only terms that are acceptable to him. And if the Iranians come back to the table and still don't accept them, he's going to send them away again and escalate further, because what he wants is unconditional surrender. He wants victory, complete victory. Okay, that's what we're seeing here. It's unfolding phase by phase, piece by piece, and the rhetoric is not necessarily a rhetoric of come and surrender. Like I said, that would be unproductive, and they're using the rhetoric of cutting a deal. But I don't think we have anything to worry about the regime remaining somehow still in power in the course of this, because whoever ends up capitulating and surrendering, even if those words aren't used by them, they'll just call it a deal's been struck between the United States and Iran. But if 100% of the demands of Trump, of the Americans are agreed to, well, that will mean that they're not persecuting their people, they're not funding their proxies, they're not doing any of this stuff, and the Americans are going to keep a watchful eye over their behavior. The Israelis are going to keep a watchful eye over their behavior. They're not going to be able to start shooting protesters, and protesters will come out into the streets. There is going to be a fall of the regime, the war, and that's why Trump keeps saying this war has already been won. In a certain sense, it has. It's just the other side isn't agreeing to surrender. But make no mistake about it, we've simply moved from the bombing air raids phase of the war to the economic war and the siege, a good old-fashioned ancient type of warfare where you choke off an economy. Now, siege warfare takes time. It feels like nothing's happening because we're just watching news clips, but a lot is happening. Siege warfare takes time. It builds day by day. Picture it this way. There's an escalation happening as a matter of course because there's a siege laid to the Iranian economy. They're not going to feel it on day one or day two, or they will already, but they're not going to feel it's going to keep building and building and building. Okay? That's where we are in the war. This isn't a ceasefire. There was an attempt at a ceasefire to facilitate a surrender. The ceasefire is over. We're now in the next phase of the war. That's what is happening here. I hope I cleared that up. I hope it made sense. I know I was a bit repetitive. I'm sorry for that. But I just want to be clear. I want to be clear-eyed so that we don't lose focus and we don't get, there's a sense of panic that some people have every time it looks like we're going to stop short of actually winning the war. There's a process here, and we're seeing it play out. All right. God bless.